Welcome back, everyone. What is going on, guys? I am Jesse Levine. You are listening to All In, and life has changed. We were on the St. John's radio station. Shout out to WSJU still for starting our radio show, and TuneIn Radio for putting us on the air at the time. But life has changed. We have the coronavirus. St. John's University has sadly been shut down. New York City has been shut down, and school has been postponed for the rest of the year. But with everything, life changes, and so does our show. So today we're doing this in a different form as a podcast, and we can't wait to bring you week by week episodes of what's still going on in the sports world, our predictions for what's upcoming. We're going to do some what if segments and some stuff throughout our shows, but I cannot wait to get this started. We still have the same group of people. Cameron Johnson in the studio.
How are we? It's great to be back.
Cameron Smith in the studio.
What's good? Coronavirus can't stop buzz.
That's right. Jimmy Guancione coming on for back-to-back shows.
Great to be back.
And the person that really actually helped us get started and producing our show for us, Jordon Malick on the show today.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be producing.
I'm so happy that we were able to do it. You know, sports been canceled, but what hasn't been canceled is the NFL free agency. We have had an incredible few weeks and jam-packed news. So why don't we get right into that? I don't want to waste any time. We're going to go into the winners, the losers, and the biggest surprises so far in the free agency season. And I'll start off first. You got to start with the Arizona Cardinals and trading for DeAndre Hopkins, top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. Some would argue the best wide receiver in the NFL. You put a playmaking quarterback with a playmaking wide receiver, and good stuff happens. We're talking about a quarterback that's going into his sophomore year, had a very solid rookie year for Kyler Murray. You now have a above average running back in Kenyon Drake and a great second receiver still in Larry Fitzgerald. When you put playmakers together, good things happen on the offensive side of the ball. I cannot wait to see what the Arizona Cardinals do this season. Not to mention that they gave away David Johnson, who was incredible in 2016 and 2017, but it hasn't been relevant since. I thought it was a terrible trade for the Texans. Huge props to the Cardinals for making this trade, and they're going to play some exciting football. I can't wait to see what happens. Let's go with Cameron Smith. Cameron, what's your guess win?
For my winners, I'm actually going to go with the New York Giants. I thought that the Giants roster last year was really good, at least on the offensive side of the ball. They had Saquon, Evan Ingram, but they dealt with injuries a lot during the season. But their big spot last year that was a room for concern was probably their defense. Their linebacking core has always been lacking, and in the last couple of years in the draft, they've taken guys like Dexter Lawrence and Dalvin Tomlinson. They want to bolster up the D-line. So now they've gone out. They've signed Blake Martinez in free agency. They got James Bradbury from the Panthers. They had a new first cornerback that they can pair with DeAndre Baker. And on top of this, Jadeveon Clowney is still on the board. And the Giants have been linked with Jadeveon Clowney since the moment his free agency run started. And I think if they can get Jadeveon and not give him the Brinks truck like a lot of people are expecting, I think the Giants will walk away like thieves in this free agency.
No doubt about it. They've definitely added a ton of people. Let's go to Cameron Johnson. What's your biggest winner this offseason?
The biggest winner, by far, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Come on now. Adding the greatest quarterback of all time to their ranks, and now you're adding the greatest quarterback of all time to your ranks, and you're taking off a man who threw 30 interceptions last year. Come on now. Tom Brady hasn't thrown 30 interceptions combined in the past 5 or 6 years. So you're adding Tom Brady to a receiving core that's already one of the best receiving cores in the NFL. You have Chris Godwin. You have Mike Evans. You have Cameron Brayden and O.J. Howard, 2 very good tight ends, to one of the best offenses from last year. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to have a serious chance to contend in the NFC next season.
Absolutely.
Although it breaks my heart, it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be an exciting team next year.
Mm-hmm.
Let's also talk about Ndamukong Suh on the defensive end, 1-year deal joining the Bucs as well. That's another great
Well, they
pickup.
retain him. He was already there.
I'm sorry.
He re-signed with them. Yeah.
Sorry, good point. Sorry, yeah, he re-signed. Thank you. But that's still a great. That's a great re-sign for them because that's going to put a lot of pressure.
Sir.
He's going to put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks and for an offense. I think it's really important to also remember how great Brady was when he had 2 good tight ends in Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski. You bring that formula back. Now with 2 stud wide receivers, I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be a serious problem. Jimmy Guancione, let's go to you, buddy.
All right, so my biggest winner is the Buffalo Bills. They picked up Stephon Diggs. They picked up Josh Norman. They picked up a couple other guys on the defensive side of the ball. But I think probably the biggest plus for them this offseason is that Tom Brady is no longer in that division. So suddenly that division is wide open. You have the Bills, the Jets, and, I guess still the Patriots and the Dolphins who are coming up. But I think with the addition of Stephon Diggs, with the addition of all of the defensive players, including Josh Norman, I think that the Bills are definitely one of the front runners to take that division. So I would have to give the biggest winner to the Bills.
Absolutely. Great trade for the Bills. They gave up a lot for it, but we'll see.
I'm actually doing the calculations right now to see how many seasons it took for Tom Brady to throw 30 interceptions. Cam actually brought up a good point. This man, Jameis, my goodness. From the looks of it right now, it would have at least taken Tom Brady like 3 1/4 seasons. Because in 2016, when he played 12 games due to injury, he only threw 2 picks.
Well,
So
so 2016 was a Deflategate year.
Deflategate. Oh, that's right. Deflategate year.
Good
You
times.
probably remember that pretty fondly, don't you, Camp Johnson?
I got a Super Bowl out of it.
That's true. That's true.
Let's go last one. Jordan, what do you got for us?
My biggest winner isn't as much about what they did. It's about what all the other teams had done. My biggest winner is the Philadelphia Eagles, just because, as you mentioned, Tom Brady is now in the NFC South. You have the NFC West getting a lot stronger with Seattle, and then also Arizona. Now San Francisco has to worry about DeAndre Hopkins twice a year. Not to mention they already have Seattle in their way. Meanwhile, the Eagles are kind of just like alone at the top. The Dallas Cowboys picked Aldon Smith, who hasn't played football in 4 years, instead of Robert Quinn and Michael Bennett. It's a very questionable decision. The Giants made some good moves, but there's only so much help that like a Blake Martinez can really give you, but we still have a whole draft to go through. But as of right now, no team has helped themselves more or gotten more help than the Eagles by going from just like another division winner to possibly contending for a 1 seed just because they're going to have at least 4 easy wins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jordan, I actually have a question for you, man.
Yes.
You brought up the draft. You have two teams in the Giants and the Redskins that are both in the top 4 picks. And both of them are likely, or Giants maybe, but both have the possibility of going defense. So you're probably going to have at least Chase Young and maybe Isaiah Simmons or Derek Brown out of Auburn or somebody like that. And plus you have the possibility of Jadeveon Clowney coming in. Do you think that if something goes like that, do you think that the addition of those pass rushers into the division will change that answer?
The only reason I'm a little hesitant is to say that it would change it is because the Eagles have Lane Johnson, and as of right now, both of those teams, like Washington has Ryan Kerrigan, who is very good, but he's not Jadeveon Clowney, and
that's true.
Jadeveon Clowney would immediately be the Giants' first or best pass rusher, so he would be going against Lane Johnson a lot of the time. I'd be annoyed to see Jadeveon Clowney twice a year because of that dirty hit on Wentz, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay, I was just wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, why don't we go into the who you think lost free agency? And this could be a team, this could be different players. Let us know. Jordan, let's go right back to you.
I think my biggest loser is the New York Jets, actually. I think they've really fumbled the ball with Brady's departure. For the past, 3 years, that whole division's just been counting down the days for Brady to leave. And the Jets did it. The Jets were one offseason too early to spend crazy on big free agents. Because now the Miami Dolphins, they've just spent and spent and spent. They've added so many talents and Byron Jones and et cetera. And so I can't even remember how many players. And now the Buffalo Bills have traded for Stephon Diggs. And you use a first-round pick hoping that it turns out to be Stephon Diggs. So I think that's a very good pick or trade for them. And I think the Jets have kind of just found themselves with their, twiddling their thumbs and now have fumbled the ball and might even find themselves at the bottom division again.
Yeah, I mean, I one of the biggest problems with the Jets is the guys that they've given the big money to just haven't planned out. And
Yeah.
like the biggest one for me is Tremaine Johnson, a guy
Mm.
that was known to be one of the best cornerbacks. You get him, and he was with Marcus Claiborne. Sorry, Morris Claiborne. Um, and now I'm looking. He's released. A
Yeah.
guy that was considered to be one of the best cornerbacks in the year in the league within 2 years has been released from a team that hasn't been 500 in I don't know how long. So I'm disappointed. Being a Jets fan, I'm disappointed in the contracts that we given him. I'm actually not upset that we didn't pay Robbie Anderson the money of $10 million a
Yeah.
year. I think he's got speed and that's it. But my question is, who's Sam Darnold throwing the ball to? What weapons are we putting around him? Our defense is going to be okay. The Jets defense is never that bad, but we have had trouble scoring the ball for years, and nothing has changed in the offseason. Nothing. Jimmy, let's go right back to you.
Okay, so my biggest loser is the Houston Texans. Of course, we already talked about they gave up they traded for David Johnson. They had to pick up that big contract, and also they lost arguably the best wide receiver in the entire league. Um, I just see them as having one of the best wide receiver quarterback duos in the entire NFL with Deshaun Watson and Hopkins. They had great chemistry. Plus, they had additional pieces like Kenny Stills, which they traded for. But once you get rid of a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, it kind of changes up your entire offense because not only is he a huge threat, but he also makes the defenses that you play the change up. They suddenly have to double coverage DeAndre Hopkins. They have to pay so much more mindset to DeAndre, and then it frees everybody else up. They know it changes up their entire defensive scheme in my opinion. So you trade a guy like that and you don't get anything really equal in return. Plus David Johnson is just such a huge question mark with injury. You don't know if he's ever going to be the same, and you don't even know how many games he's really going to play for you. I don't understand the trade. I don't like the trade at all, and I think that they're the biggest losers of this offseason, honestly.
I totally see what you mean there. Absolutely. Cam Johnson, why don't we go to you, buddy?
I'd have to say the biggest loser in this free agency is Jameis Winston.
That's my pick as well.
Jameis Winston, he went from having one of the best receiving cores in the NFL, still throwing 30 interceptions to, being a free agent now, not having a team, and arguably having to take a backup role. Even though he threw for a ton of yards last year, a ton of touchdowns, teams just don't want to gamble on him and, take that risk and, you know, risk him throwing 30 interceptions again in the season. So Jameis Winston's still a free agent right now, and you'd be hard pressed to find a spot where he could be a starting quarterback because he's competing with the likes of Cam Newton. And honestly, I'd rather take Cam Newton than Jameis Winston if I were filling out the role of my starting quarterback. So Jameis Winston might have to take a backup role this upcoming year. And it's not like he can be the backup of the Bucs because the Bucs just signed Blaine Gabbert to be Tom Brady's backup. So if I were Jameis Winston, I'd be pretty upset that you went from having one of the best receiving cores in the NFL to now being unemployed for the moment and probably not starting at all in
Yeah,
the 2020-2021 season.
I'm gonna jump in here because Jameis Winston was one of my two picks as well for biggest loser. I just want to throw out some stats that Jameis Winston had. If let's forget the negatives for a second, Jameis Winston. Let's just look at the positives. If I told someone that you could get a quarterback that threw for 5,100 yards, 33 touchdowns, and averaged almost 320 yards passing per game, it would be a no-brainer. You would say this guy's one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
Of course.
Okay? 30 interceptions, though, is insane. I mean, both stats, honestly, on both sides. The 5,100 yards, partially that's because his interceptions just put the team down so much every time that he had to continuously throw the ball. I mean, 626 attempts throwing last year. That is almost 100 more than Sorry, that's about 60 more than he did the last time in 2016, which is his second highest. In um, and in 2015, his rookie year, he had 535, but nothing even close to cracking the 600 mark. Now he throws for 626. The interceptions are a killer for Jameis Winston, and I think he's actually a fine quarterback. I think that he's got a lot of talent there. I mean, you have to have talent to be able to throw for 5,100 yards and 33 touchdowns. The other biggest loser is Cam Newton. And the reason I'm going to say Cam Newton is partially I think he was just a complete loser last year. I want to go over the guy that replaced Cam Newton. And I get that there is some stuff going on. But let me find he got replaced by Kyle Allen. Kyle Allen threw 17 touchdowns and 16 interceptions. This guy was like 5-0 for the first 5 weeks and was like the savior of the team. And he stunk. He wasn't good at all. Like, he was a below average quarterback. I remember Cam Smith and I were doing a segment on him last semester about how he was like the most overrated quarterback, and during those 5 games he had one good game in him.
Yeah.
So he hasn't done anything, Kyle Allen. Now Cam Newton gets replaced by Teddy Bridgewater. I can't hate on Teddy Bridgewater. He did an incredible job for the Saints.
Gotta love Teddy.
But Cam Newton's left jobless, and he played 2 games last year. And since 2015, it's been a straight downhill for him. Could he be going to the Patriots potentially? I don't even know if that's going to happen. And what doesn't help either is that he's been a head case this offseason. But his back and forth with the Panthers does not look good on him, or the organization as a whole. And so I think Cam Newton's screwed. I don't think he's going to have a starting job this year. It's too bad because he's a talented guy that just got replaced by a guy that wasn't good, and he hasn't been able to take advantage of it in any of the few seasons of his starting jobs in the last few years. Let's go into the last segment, which is who is the biggest surprise in free agency. I'm going to go to Cameron Johnson to start.
I would say one of mine that kind of flew under the radar, but is a big move in my opinion, is that the Eagles let Malcolm Jenkins walk.
I'm sure Jordan's going to have a lot to say.
Malcolm Jenkins has been a staple on the Eagles defense that had one of the worst secondaries in the NFL last year. Letting Malcolm Jenkins walk is like removing the staple from a defense that was already poorly bound last year. I know they added Darius Slay. I know they bolstered the defense in some respect. Darius Slay is a great corner, obviously. But letting Malcolm Jenkins go, really the heart and soul of that defense, was honestly very surprising to me. And the Saints picked up a great safety, hard-hitting, tough safety in Malcolm Jenkins. So the Eagles letting him go was surprising to me because he kind of seemed like a franchise guy to me. And he seemed very well respected, very well liked in the locker room. So them letting him go was very surprising to me. And it was honestly a great pickup for the Saints.
Jordan, I want to go to you about what your whole thoughts on this, obviously being a diehard Eagles fan.
So since his departure, I was originally I was upset and shocked because he was still under contract. He had a team option, but he wanted a pay raise, or at least that was the narrative. But the Eagles then declined their option. All of the city was very in shock and upset because it was like, how could you let him go? But now that I've looked back, I've actually been rewatching because NFL Game Pass is free. Got to shout that out. I've been rewatching the games, rewatching the coach's film. And Malcolm Jenkins was a huge liability in pass coverage. It's a crime that he's labeled as a safety because he plays a majority of his snaps and makes most of his contributions as a linebacker. So I'm not upset that he's gone because I think Will Parks is going to torment the Giants and the Redskins and the Cowboys, all them. He's the new safety that's been signed. Jalen Mills switching, going back to his original position when he was in college. I think it's the right move. Obviously, it's one of those moves that's worse for the franchise than it is the team.
Let's go to Jimmy.
All right, so my biggest surprise, actually, first of all, I'd just like to, we were talking about the quarterback situation, and I forgot to chime in about this real quick, about Cam Newton and Jameis. I think that just another huge problem that they're going to face is just the strength of this draft. You have Tua, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, and a lot of the teams that were looking for a quarterback, like the Bengals, the Chargers, they're most likely going to go to the draft. So
That's a great point.
That's another point that where they're going to run into problems. They would a lot of teams would rather invest in a younger quarterback rather than take a guy where like Cam Newton's had his problems, Jameis has the interception problem. I think they'd rather go young in the draft. Anyway, for my biggest surprise.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I want to get you in on this really quickly because we're not going to talk about this later. If the NFL season is pushed back, how big of a plus is that for somebody like Tua, who has had injury problems, and wasn't sure if he was going to be able to start the week one? Do you think that potentially puts him up? I know a lot of people are looking at him as a 3 pick after obviously Burrow and Chase Young. Is this now, if let's say the season gets pushed back to November, is this maybe now we're looking at a Burrow 2 at 2 and Chase Young 3?
I mean, I don't know if the Redskins would take another quarterback after taking a quarterback so high last year. I mean, they could. Who knows? But I think that a later start to the season is a plus for any quarterback, or honestly, any player in the draft, just because they have more time in the organization, more time to study the playbook, get the chemistry down with your guys. I don't think that it would do anything but help the players. I think it would hurt a lot of the fans because honestly, we want football, and I think it would hurt some of the existing players that want to get right back into it. But I think for young quarterbacks, especially, and young players in general, I think that a pushback would only help them, and especially with Tua with his injury. He says he's 100%, but honestly, who knows at this point? He's the only one that really knows. And I think that giving him more time to recover would only help him. I don't know how, if you're the Redskins, you can pass up on Chase Young. I really don't. Honestly, one of the best edge rushing talents that we've seen in a long time, and that's including we had Clowney, we had Myles Garrett, we had a lot of guys, and from what I've been hearing, everybody's like, this guy is arguably a better prospect than even those guys. So I don't know if they're going to do that. I don't see him falling past 3. I think if the Lions are a bit are able to get him, I think they're going to take him. I don't think he's going to fall to the Giants as much as I would like him to. I don't think he's going to fall to the Giants, but yeah. So I think that a pushback, it's going to be interesting because with the draft, it's a big question mark. Yeah. Go ahead, Jordan.
I think one thing that's super telling is that the Redskins had actually traded for Kyle Allen, who he was playing with Riverboat Ron in Carolina. And a lot of that is because of they might have to go without OTAs, but the season might not get delayed. That's like the number one fear right now. So then Kyle Allen is going to be the week 1 starter while Dwayne Haskins starts to learn. So I think that there's going to be a little bit of a resurgence of these kind of adequate backups or inadequate backups like Kyle Allen. Maybe Jameis Winston or Cam Newton can find a home with a offensive coach that they've had in the past, because knowledge is what creates a leader, not talent.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, even if they get signed, it's not going to be on a long-term basis. No team,
Absolutely.
I can't think of any teams right now that are like, I want to invest in Cam Newton or what's it called, or Jameis Winston. Anyway, my biggest surprise of this offseason is the Rams dropping Todd Gurley. Honestly, I had him on my fantasy team. I can't believe that they dropped him. I mean, sure, he's had his injury problems, but he still started 15 games last season, and 14 the year before. I mean, the guy's he has his injury problems, but he's usually a tank, and he can fight through it. He's had 1,000 yards rushing in 3 out of his 5 seasons, and in those other 2 seasons, he had over 850 yards. He scores a lot of touchdowns because he can just pound the ball into the end zone. He can catch the ball. He's a He's a 3-time Pro Bowler, 2-time first team All Pro. He was the 2017 Offensive Player of the Year. I just did not see them dropping a guy like that. Honestly, I thought that they would keep him and at least let him pan out for the rest of his contract, or try and trade him.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I talk about this with one of my friends all the time, and he's very keen on this. He talks about the lifespan of running backs. Let's look, someone after 5-6 seasons, some running backs at the top of their game just aren't the same anymore. And a lot of times it's because of injuries. But let's look at some. How about muscle hamster Doug Martin? Where is he? He's probably only 30 years old. Haven't heard of him in 3 years. Devontae Freeman, he was a top 3 running back. Now he plays for a team that can't even get 5 wins in a year. Jordan Howard was leading the league in rushing. Jordan, was he the 3rd string running back on the Eagles?
Second, but your point's valid.
Yeah. Okay. Just the lifespan of running backs is so small, and we see new running backs coming all the time. And I think as much as it's important to have a strong running back, we see just by a running back going into a strong offensive line, them being able to be successful. We saw it with DeMarco Murray on the Dallas Cowboys. He went to the Eagles, he did nothing. Yeah. So we see the lifespan of running backs. Sometimes their prime for running backs are 2-3 years, and then they're gone. I personally don't think Todd Gurley is going to do much anymore. And I just think he's past his prime. He's banged up too much. He's too many injuries. And
he got hurt in college. I mean, he was hurt his last season in college.
That's a great point. Yeah, that was one of the reasons he fell in the draft. There was his injury problems. I just wanted to point that out there, that the lifespan of running backs are so small, and that's why a lot of as great of a talent as Saquon is, that's why some people disagree with it. What if Saquon's only good for 4 or 5 years?
Yep.
Let's go to.
Well, I'd rather have a good Saquon for 4 or 5 years than a mediocre Darnold.
Well, we'll see what happens.
I'm just kidding, Jesse.
No, you're not. Let's go to Jordan. That's your biggest surprise.
So I was originally going to go with the Houston Texans trade, but now that I'm thinking more and more about it, I think it's Nick Foles getting a over Cam Newton and Jameis Winston. I can't. The Chicago Bears trading for Nick Foles' inflated contract truly just makes no sense to me. Cam Newton would have been about $10 or $15 million cheaper. Jameis Winston, they could have signed him for much cheaper. Like, Nick Foles is getting paid $20 million just to compete with Mitchell Trubisky. Chicago's a mess.
Yeah, totally.
They want to move on from Mitch Trubisky so bad.
That was the one thing if I was the Bears, I wouldn't offer them. First of all, I wouldn't take Nick Foles' contract, even if they said Nick Foles for a 7th round pick. Absolutely not. Why do you want that guy's contract?
It's bad.
I don't get it.
And then they go out and they sign Jimmy Graham, who's just concussed always.
Speaking of another guy that was in his prime for 3 years and 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Let's go to Cameron Smith. What do you got, buddy?
I think it's maybe not as a player, maybe not a specific move, but I kind of just want to talk about the Chargers for a minute, because I think silently the Chargers have probably had one of the best off seasons of any team so far. As we know, the Chargers have a top 10 pick coming up. I think it's either 6 or 7. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I believe it's number 6.
Oh, yeah.
Number 7. And a lot of people are saying that they could draft a QB. Some people are saying they might trade up Tua, Jordan Love. Irregardless of this, it's what they've done to prepare for this draft day. They've picked up Trey Turner. They've got Brian Beluga on the front end. They're bolstering up the offensive line. They got Linval Joseph after he left the Vikings to boost up the defensive line. And they also have Chris Harris, who's going to be a great veteran on the back end. We'll be able to work with guys like Derwin James, give them that veteran insight. They franchise tagged Hunter Henry, who was probably, I love Keenan Allen, but he was the most essential target for Phillip Rivers last year.
When he's healthy. When he's healthy.
Yeah. They also not re-signed, but they did re-sign Austin Eckler, and they chose to move on from Melvin Gordon, which I think is for the best. It was the direction the team was moving in anyway. And I think all of those things lined up, I think the Chargers probably had one of the best off seasons of any team so far.
Yeah, and with that, with that high draft pick, I hear a lot of talk about them taking Justin Herbert out of Oregon, and I'm an Oregon fan, so
yeah, that'd be a great pick.
I love. Herbert. Honestly, you think about Herbert. You think about Herbert last year. If he went into the draft last year, he would have been one of the top quarterbacks there. He's kind of getting overshadowed by Tua and Joe Burrow, but you cannot forget about Justin Herbert, who has a great arm, cannon of an arm. He has all of the intangibles. I think if they can grab him with that young offense, with Keenan Allen, with Hunter Henry, with Austin Eckler, and with the shirt up defense, the sky's the limit for him, really.
Yeah.
Nah, it's Tyrod time.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. I'm gonna round this off. And what if the way I'm gonna phrase it, what if I told you that if you played good in 10 games in the NFL, you would make over $100 million over the next 4 years? That is exactly what Ryan Tannehill did. This guy was dead to beat. He was a backup for Mark Marcus Mariota. Lucky that Marcus Mariota wasn't
The
playing.
blatant disrespect towards Ryan Tannehill is
I'm
wild.
sorry, but
He's awful.
Imagine getting paid $100
but
million
this guy,
to hand the ball off to Derrick Henry.
And then
Literally.
Derrick Henry gets the franchise tag. Sorry.
this guy, I'll give him credit. He had a very solid regular season, and 26 touchdowns and 6 interceptions is very good. I mean, this is a guy that is going to keep the ball for you, not turn it over, and someone you could trust. But 4 years, $118 million is absolutely ludicrous to me. We watched those playoff games. Look, if you're going to give a quarterback $30 million, you better be able to trust him when the moment's on. And what did he do? He gave the ball to Derrick Henry, and that's fine. Okay, that's it's the game plan. Derrick Henry's an absolute monster, but it's a great point. You franchise tag the person that brought you to the AFC Championship, and honestly, you probably should have been in the Super Bowl if they didn't choke. But you give a quarterback that played 10 games and handed the ball off to the best player the $30 million a year doesn't make sense to me.
And $91 million guaranteed.
What, $62 million you said?
Oh, $91 million guaranteed for someone who his whole career has been derailed by
Makes
one
me feel
ACL
much
injury.
better about Kirk Cousins.
I mean, I guess once they think they found their guy. I mean, I guess once you think you find your guy that fits your system, I mean, I guess you have to pay him, but
Jordan,
I don't understand it.
That's why Dak is worth $400 million.
Yeah. 62 million in fully guaranteed money, 91 million in total guarantees. I think it's a bad contract for them, and we'll see. But here's the thing, though: he's not a young guy anymore either. The guy's like 31 years old. He's not a young guy anymore. I feel like he's 31 years old. I mean, this is. I don't know. We're going to be paying a 35-year-old past his prime $30 million for someone that played 10 good games. I don't like it.
And lost the job in Miami too.
Lost the job in Miami. Let's completely transition over. Let's go. I want to go into a little bit of hypothetical stuff. And obviously we don't have any sports going on right now. But at some point sports are going to come back. And
hopefully,
fingers crossed that we're still able to get the NBA season to either have playoffs or have regular season plus playoffs. So I'm going to throw a 2-part question out there. One is, which team does this break hurt the most, and which team does this break help the most? And second is, if the NBA season can continue, which are we going to? Do you think that there should be regular season games, maybe finish off the regular season, maybe 5 regular season games, or go straight into playoffs? I'm going to start with this one. I think for the biggest hurt, you got to go with the Los Angeles Lakers. They basically just came off. They came off beating the Milwaukee Bucks. Finally beat the Los Angeles Clippers. If you were listening to interviews, I was listening to Danny Green on First Take, and he was saying that they were about 85% of the way of where they wanted to be, but they felt that the snowball was really rolling and they were playing some really good basketball. And I couldn't agree more. LeBron James playing absolutely incredible, averaging almost 11 assists a game, and Anthony Davis being a monster. But it was more than that. It was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope having a significant role. It was people like Alex Caruso. I mean, he's overrated, but JaVale McGee started having a good role. Avery Bradley and Danny Green playing some really good perimeter defense. So I think it's a loss for them, but at the same time, I think they'll be back in it because they have the best leader in basketball, and the person with, I believe, also has the best IQ. So I think they'll be right back in it. They have a ton of talent. And for the team that helps the most, I think you got to go with the Brooklyn Nets, just because of injuries. Let's hypothetically say that the season comes back in July, and I think that's being on the positive side of it, to be honest. You know who's going to be back? Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is going to be back playing for the Brooklyn Nets. They're going to, and if they start in the playoffs, he's going to be playing. Kyrie Irving is going to be back. Okay. All of a sudden, this team went from a 7 seed that's going to get eliminated pretty easily to a 7 seed that nobody's going to want to play.
Yeah.
It is going to be dangerous. And we'll see how Kevin Durant is coming off this Achilles injury, and Kyrie Irving coming off, a bunch of injuries this season. But they are a team that you do not, you as a 2 seed, you just don't want to see a 7 seed with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. It doesn't even matter the supporting cast. And they have a great supporting cast in Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert and Allen and Joe Harris and a bunch of other people. And I think in terms of the season, I think that you actually have to play a few regular season games. I think that maybe you either finish the season because there's only like 10 or 12 more games. There's like 12 more games left. Or you put maybe the last 5 games of the regular season. I don't think it's fair for teams to, after not playing for 4 months, to hop right into the playoffs. I don't think it's fair at all.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to be some concern because, like, let's say if a team has a really easy schedule and you had to skip over that part, they get screwed. But look, we need basketball back, and I think that for basketball to be at a high performance, you need a few regular season games. Let's go to Cameron Johnson on this.
Well, I'm going to start with your second part as to what I think they're going to do. I think that they should play a couple regular season games, but I don't think they're going to. I think they're going to hop right into the playoffs. I've been reading up on a bunch of things that they're going to do potentially with the playoffs, like move it to Vegas, have the first round be 5 games. It's kind of like a tune-up round. And then the quarterfinals and Eastern Conference, Western Conference finals be 1 game, which is honestly absurd to me. It seems kind of backwards, but and then have the NBA finals be 7 games. But whatever the NBA does, I think that they're going to go right into the playoffs. And then to answer your other questions, who it hurts the most, if they were to hop right into the playoffs, you know who it hurts the most? The New Orleans Pelicans.
No doubt about it.
The Pelicans were on the verge. I don't know if they would have done it, but there was a strong possibility that they would have taken over that 8 seed in the Western Conference from the Grizzlies and made some noise in the they just would have been fun to watch in the playoffs. Zion carried the team with Brandon Ingram, Lonzo, all those guys, carried them into the playoffs as the 8 seed. They get some playoff experience, and they have a bright future, and that writes off their 2020 season. But with this hiatus that the NBA is taking, and my prediction is that they're going to go right into the playoffs, that kills the Pelicans because they're not in the playoffs right now, so they wouldn't play. Their season's just over. It's over. You just have to wait for the 2020-2021 season. And then for my team that it helps the most, I like your pick with the Nets, but I honestly don't think Kevin Durant's going to come back. A ruptured Achilles is a tough injury to play around with. My team that it helps the most, I would probably say the Clippers, because it doesn't help teams that were playing well. My other team that it also hurts is the Raptors because they were on a great run this year. Although they weren't the most talented team, they were winning games in a lot of games. They had that streak of 15, 16 consecutive games won?
I think it was 14.
Yeah, so they had a lot of games won consecutive. They were playing great basketball, so it hurts them as well. The team that it helps most is probably the Clippers. If they want to get everyone healthy, Kawhi probably would have sat out the amount of games that the NBA was taking a hiatus. So he would have sat out all these games anyway, load managed, getting ready for the playoffs. And it also, for the Clippers, their only real competition in the West is the Lakers. It's going to be them too in the Western Conference Finals. So slowing the Lakers down and, getting them out of their groove or whatever they were on and how well they were playing, getting them off of that is great for the Clippers. So you're basically starting a fresh season. And honestly, the Clippers have better role players. They have better depth than the Lakers. The Lakers stars may be better, but the Clippers have more depth. And if they get into a 7-game series, then I would take the Clippers.
I think that's a good point because the Clippers have also been either banged up or they've been trying to do load management. And for the Pelicans, this was a team that started off 6-21 this year.
Yeah.
And somehow, made a run over 500 basketball with Zion Williams. And really, they've just been playing great basketball since that 6-21 horrific start. Let's go to Jimmy next.
All right. So I think that the main team that it helps are teams that don't have those like you look at LA, you have Anthony Davis and LeBron, and then on the other side of LA you have Kawhi and Paul George. I think that those teams have so much talent, it doesn't put a lot of strain on like both of their stars. I think that guys that have like the Bucks with Giannis, it's like Giannis is the focal point of that team. he's the he's the focus on offense, and he's a big defensive player too. I think that it helps really the teams like the Bucks that have that one superstar that they really rely on to carry their team. Well, not really, like they have a great supporting cast, but that one player really carries their franchise, and it gives him a break. And then they go into the playoffs as the number one seed if they start the playoffs right away. Um, yeah, so I think that it helps the Bucks just because it or teams like the Bucks because it gives their star players a little bit of a break. You don't have the wear and tear of the entire NBA season fighting for the number one seed. So I think that it helps teams like the Bucks the most, and I think that it hurts teams that are newer, like these two. Like you have even both teams in LA, and even teams like the Nets. I think it actually kind of hurts them because if I'm not mistaken, because of coronavirus, they can't have like team practices or anything like that. So these teams are new, and you have big personalities usually and a lot of talent. But I think that especially in basketball, chemistry and knowing what your guys are going to do and how your guys play is a really big factor into that game. So, I mean, even if KD can come back for like the Nets, and the Nets make the playoffs, which they are in the seventh seed right now, it's such a big question mark because you don't know how Kyrie and KD are going to play together because they've never played together on the same team in any games, and it's going to start in the playoffs. And there's always a little bit of a feeling out process. And I think that if you start in the playoffs, it could actually hurt them. Like, sure, it gives him some more time to come back, but he would have had that time if they were still playing, and then they could have the practices together and kind of ease him in. So I would say that it actually hurts these newer teams that haven't developed the chemistry yet. That some of these more experienced teams, like even the Bucks don't have all the talent in the world, but they definitely have the chemistry, and then they have the superstar in Giannis. So I would say that those are my winners and losers for this, if they are able to come back.
Gotcha. Understand. Let's go to Cam Smith and then Jordan to close it off.
I think one team, despite the fact that they're pretty close to sneaking into a playoff spot, but one team I think that'll probably be happy that they can just kind of, metaphorically kill off the season is probably going to be the Blazers. The Blazers underperformed so miserably this year for the amount of talent that they have on their roster. They dealt with little stints of injuries to Dame Lillard, and Dame really was the firepower of the offense. And even in his wake when he was gone, CJ McCollum had stepped up and had a couple big games. But really, they were so hurt on the front end this year. What's
Nurkic,
that?
And not having Yusuf Nurkic.
That's what I was saying. Not having Nurkic really, I think, kind of hurt this team this year. And I think if they get healthy, they regroup. They have Nurkic and Whiteside with Dame and CJ. I think the team could make some damage in the West like we've known them to do. So I'd probably say they're the biggest winners / losers. But if you want a real winner, I'll give you a real winner. The New York Knicks. Just
Wait, we haven't heard that in a long
time. We don't have to watch Knicks basketball for the rest of the year. I guess that's the positive.
That's the first time the Knicks have been in the winning column in anything this year.
How's it feel that LaMelo Ball is going to be on the Knicks at this time next year?
I hope so. Jordan, let's round it off to close our show.
So my winner and loser is actually going to be the same exact team because the last really big team that's been plagued by injuries has been the Philadelphia 76ers.
But this is going that way?
At the same
the Sixers
time,
are awful this year.
They are the worst when it comes to coming back from any sort of break. Joel Embiid always comes back. When he comes back from injury, it takes him about 10 games to finally get back into game shape. And it's like that. It seems like that with every player on the team because Ben Simmons went out right before with like a back injury, out indefinitely. Josh Richardson was just about to come back from a concussion, so like that's good that he's getting more time back, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they always have some level of growing pains, and they're going to go through them again.
Did you see that Elton Brand was being targeted by the Knicks for their next GM spot?
I hope he does it and then trades for Al Horford.
The first move is to trade Al Horford and inherit that $100 whatever it is $1
$109 million.
Please get his formed year $80 billion contract, please.
$109 million for ancient Al Horford.
All right, let's go. Playoff Al.
Yeah. Oh, man,
what a guy, Playoff Al.
next week, by the way, Jordan, I want to break down, which we will. We're going to break down a lot of the 76ers because we've been talking about so much on our show. The difference in how they play home versus the road. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it in basketball. But until then, we are going to come back next week. Next week, we're going to talk about which sports can be brought back first, potentially without fans. Some of our future predictions, even though betting lines aren't out right now, some future predictions in baseball, hockey, basketball, football that we go to. We're going to talk a little bit of UFC next week. We're going to talk about the fact that there's going to be no Khabib Ferguson for right now and the future of that sport. So we're going to talk about that next week. Of course, a little bit more football, more basketball, and we may get into even some hot stove next week for baseball. So next week, listen to us again. We'll be posting every single week. Thank you so much for listening to our show, and we're going to try to do this as much as we can. While the sports world is dead, we're going to try to bring a hourly sports podcast to you each week. So thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week. Take care.